Good day, and welcome to our online participants. My name is Barry Crampton, Radio Amateur License VE3 BSB. I appreciate having this virtual opportunity of telling the story of the amateur radio project that participated in the celebrations of the 150th anniversary of the formation of Canada, and which may be of interest to others involved with HF propagation applications. This retired Canadian Coast Guard icebreaker, now called the Polar Prince, was the center of this story, shown here off the coast of Labrador during the expedition. The concept was to install an amateur radio tracking system aboard the Polar Prince for the Canada C3 expedition, a unique 150-day voyage of the Polar Prince carrying passengers traveling down the St. Lawrence River from Toronto and following the three coastlines through the historic Northwest Passage and terminating in Victoria, British Columbia. This is the proposed route map, notated with significant points of interest and visitation sites as the Polar Prince followed the three coastlines of Canada. After learning about the expedition in early 2017, we approached the expedition sponsors to seek approval to install the tracking system. The objectives were threefold: to operate a weak signal propagation reporting, called WSPR, beacon transmitter, to draw national and international attention to the expedition and to the coastlines of Canada by having the amateur radio fraternity follow the voyage and observe the locations of the ship and of the coastal communities, landmasses, and spectacular coastline features of our country. And for the amateurs to hold a national event that would showcase the newer technologies available to the amateur radio service. To collect never before available HF propagation data from a vessel moving through the Canadian Arctic. The Weak Signal Propagation Reporting System is a software protocol developed by astrophysics professor Joe Taylor, K1JT. The equipment was the QRP Labs kit-built beacon transmitter, which outputs a 900 milliwatt beacon 18 times per hour on the 20, 30, and 40 meter amateur frequencies. Fortunately, the ship, normally based in Lunenburg, Nova Scotia, sailed to Prescott, Ontario to be fitted out with all of the expedition equipment and supplies. Prescott is conveniently located only 1 hour drive from my home. The high-frequency radio beacon required a long wire antenna, and these options were considered, both those that were commercial and those that were home built. Luke, V3JGL, and myself received a tour of the ship by the captain, and we surveyed the options for equipment and antenna locations. While we would have liked to have installed a 130-foot long wire on the length of the ship, we were given permission to use this midship tower. Luke, an experienced tower climber, climbed to the top of the 46-foot midship tower and installed a 46-foot wire at the highest point. The feed point of the antenna and matching transformer were attached to the port rail. Note in the right of the picture the small patch antenna, which provided satellite reception to an internal GPS receiver which was inside the beacon transmitter. Note the position of the wire antenna to the massive metal midship tower and the geosynchronous satellite tracking antenna. In spite of this location, signal reception was not adversely affected. It was necessary to find cable routes from the HF and GPS antennas through the ship to the radio server room. Looking around here for access points. After fishing coax cable from above deck through the bridge to the radio room, it was necessary to find a location for the small transmitter and power supply. This spot on the top of the Hammond equipment rack was the most convenient during the hectic time we had in the small radio room competing with other installers of satellite, video, and internet systems. More to come about this location. The WSPR data packets were transmitted on a 900 milliwatt transmitter using the WSPR protocol on the 20, 30, and 40 meter bands, 2 minutes per packet, 18 transmissions per hour. Call sign was transmitted, a 6-character grid location code, and the transmitted power level. The worldwide amateur radio stations received and uploaded data to the website with a UTC timestamp, a receive station call sign, the grid square of the receiver location, the signal strength of the received signal, and the azimuth and distance to the transmitter. Individual HF radio stations install an application called WSJT-X on their home station computer. This application automatically uploads the received WSPR data to the whispernet.org website. There are hundreds of these amateurs that continually monitor the assigned WSPR frequencies on the amateur bands. The data is open to the public. This is a typical display of the ship's signal being received by stations around the world. There is a line drawn arbitrarily between the ship and the individual station that it is being received by at any given point in time. QRP Labs, the equipment provider, maintained a site which provided in real time the location of the polar prints. Online access to this site was maintained in Canada by Geoff, VE3EFF. This is an interesting propagation condition where we frequently saw these receiving stations in a row, while there were known stations between that are not shown and were not receiving the CG3 EXP signals. The WSPR.org website, in addition to providing an up-to-date graphic display of the propagation data, maintained a continuous log of the data packets received from all participating amateur stations around the world. There were 425,445 WSPR reports for the transmissions from CG3 EXP. Reports were received from each and every continent. The data was collected and reported by Graham Collins, V3GTC. The polar prints location was based on using the Maidenhead grid square algorithm. In addition to maintaining our own log of all the raw data packets, Graham produced graphs such as this 40-meter band distribution of signals by distance. This graph displays the total of all the daily reception counts for the entire C3 voyage, peaking at 4,800 on one day. Note the signal loss between August the 4th and 6th. While researching the cause of this loss of signal, we discovered that the Deep Space Climate Observatory had registered a jump in both solar wind density and magnitude of the interplanetary magnetics at 9:39 UTC on August the 2nd. The report at that time indicated that solar wind speed is currently 420 kilometers per second and is expected to increase significantly in the next few hours. Active geomagnetic levels to moderate geomagnetic field storms are possible throughout August 4th and 5th. During these magnetic storms, note the position of the aurora at this time when the polar prince was north of the auroral zone. The ship was also equipped with continuous spectacular live camera imagery available on the C3 expedition, available to the public. In recognition of the WSPR project being on the C3, John Gilbert's son shipped his sculpture of a muskox to intercept the ship at Cambridge Bay for the expedition founder, Geoff Green. Note the ship blurred in the distance. The Polar Prince arrived on time to great fanfare, having traveled all the 3 coastlines and traversing the historic Northwest Passage. In addition to providing the WSPR propagation data, the beacon also tracked the entire 25,323 kilometers of the voyage. In true amateur radio fashion, amateurs from around the world could apply for a confirmation of reception QSL card, and if they identified a specific feature of the coastline, they were eligible to receive a special award certificate. With the successful completion of the Canada C3 expedition culminating with the Polar Prince's arrival in Victoria, it was necessary to retire the CG3EXP special event call sign. Thankfully, an opportunity arose in December 2017 to once again have the Polar Prince carry the Ultimate 3 WSPR beacon as the ship made the return voyage to Canada's east coast via the Panama Canal. For this unique amateur radio opportunity, the Polar Prince transmitted with a new special call sign VE30EXP. We arranged with Michael, a student from the University of Victoria, to change the call sign on the transmitter before it left Victoria. On January 4th, 2018, as the Polar Prince was west of Bermuda, WSPR signals were no longer being received. This was during the period of that east coast of the United States was being plummeted with hurricane force winds. WSPR data received immediately before the signal was lost indicated that the Polar Prince had slowed to 1/3 its speed and there was some frequency drift of the transmitter. NOAA Atlantic weather maps indicated that the ship would have been in gale force winds and seas of 12 to 20 feet. The weather charts showed this deep depression west of Bermuda. While the wave height charts indicated that the ship had been in 12 to 20 foot waves. We had concerns about the ship's safety, so we emailed our Canada C3 expedition contacts and advised them about the signal loss, emphasizing it was more likely an equipment failure. The next morning, we were advised that the Polar Prince owners had been in touch with the ship and all was as well. The Polar Prince arrived in Lunenburg, Nova Scotia on January 9th, 2018, and this arrival meant that the Polar Prince had successfully navigated North America, the 3rd vessel ever to make such an historic voyage. Lowell Demond, a friend of John Gilbert, lives near Lunenburg. In May 2017, he had undertaken a reconnaissance of the ship to determine if there were any existing vertical antennas we could have used. On January 15, 2018, he again visited the ship and found that the Ultimate 3 beacon had fallen off the cabinet and the power supply had been disconnected. So much for my choice of location for the transmitter. The ship had completed the circumnavigation of North America and traveled a total of 38,614 kilometers, the third ship in history to do so. The combined voyages accounted for a total of 654,000 logged receptions from around the world. On behalf of the team members, I would very much like to thank you for having had this opportunity to tell you this story of Whisper on board the Canada C3 expedition. Thank you. I'd like to now leave you with this beautiful ship of the Canada C3 expedition in the Arctic Ocean. Once again, thank you.